Welcome to episode 28 of Talking Prisoner. Today we have one of our biggest guests yet. This guest appeared in 405 episodes of Prisoner. You could say that she is one of the biggest stars of Prisoner. Our guest has also appeared in Cop Shop, Jonah, Richmond Hill, Betty's Bunch, Home and Away, All Saints, and most recently Eden. Our guest has a career spanning several decades with a huge list of highly esteemed film, television, and theatre credits to her name. She's a veteran of the entertainment industry and was once friends with the late, great Sammy Davis Jr. Our guest has also played Madame Morrible in Wicked for 7 years and 1,600 performances. We're, of course, talking about the talented Maggie Kirkpatrick, who played Officer Joan Ferguson. Welcome to Talking Prisoner, and good afternoon, Ken.
Oh, good afternoon.
Get my breath
Thank
back
you for
now.
the welcome. Hello, Ken.
Hi there.
Hello, darling. Good to see you. Mind you, at my age, it's just good to see. Listen, before we get into the nitty-gritty, can I just say a couple of words?
Of course.
Sure.
I just want to say that, to explain that 4.5 years of Prisoner and Joan Ferguson kind of don't feature above all else in my 60 years as an actor. Yes, I was grateful for 4.5 years' work. I'm honoured that I was able to create a character that has had such impact, you know, but as for all the minute details of scenes and characters and moments and feelings, they've all gone in the mists of time, you know, but what does stay with me are the friendships I made. And although I don't quite understand this world of fandom, I'm extremely grateful to all our fans who have been loyal for so long and have indeed supported me through some pretty dark times. So I just wanted to say that. So forgive me if I don't remember all the little teensy-weensy details, because it's a long time ago, and let's face it, it was only 4.5 years out of 60, you know. So let's go, boys.
All right. Thanks so much. Can we go back to your childhood? Can we just touch on that quickly? What was it like growing up for you as a child? Where did you grow up?
Well, if anybody's read my book, they will know that I was born on the 29th of January, 1941 in Albury in New South Wales. My mother and my father, Jim and Chrissy Downs. My mother was a manager of a drapery store in Rutherglen, just over the border. And at the time of my birth, my dad was in North Africa at the siege of Tobruk. He never knew me because he was killed in action, about 6 months after I was born. Oh, wow. So my mum and I spent the first 3 years of my life in a pub run by my father's mum, my grandmother. And so lovely, a country pub. And I had about 8 aunts around me. So I was very spoiled, and I don't quite know what having been raised for those 3 years in a pub did to me, but I've been rather fond of pubs ever since. I believe they used to dip my dummy in gin to shut me up sometimes. So go figure.
What about when you were at school, and did you have any favourite subjects?
Yes, only English and history. And I was no good at anything else. No, I was only good at things that I was interested in. I never, ever once passed maths, ever. And I left school at 14 and 10 months anyway. So I wasn't all that fond of it. And I was quite pretty much the noisy one in the class. I'm sure you can imagine that, Ken.
I can figure that out.
Great. What did your mum do for work when you were younger?
Well, initially she was a country girl from Grenfell in Western New South Wales, and she had been posted down to Rutherglen to manage this department store. But from then on, I mean, a young widow at 23, she was 23, 24. Before the war ended, she'd been a bus conductress. She worked in retail. She worked in the hospitality industry. She just worked, you know. She was an amazing woman. And she hung around till she was 96.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
Wow.
darn good. Yeah.
Yeah. When did you know you wanted to be in entertainment, and what did your mum think?
I didn't know that I wanted to be, Ken. I wanted to be a nurse. That's all I ever wanted to be. However, I had been having what they used to call elocution lessons at Legacy on Friday nights. You know, all us kids who'd lost our dads in the war were treated to sort of physical culture stuff and hobbies. And there was a wonderful woman who gave elocution lessons. And this is when I was really quite small. When I went to high school, I was friendly with a girl who also used to go to this woman for private classes in elocution, or as the teacher preferred to call, speech and drama, which indeed it was. So my mum thought that this might be a good idea to give me something to do, some interest for me. So she cut my 10 shillings a week pocket money down to 5 shillings a week so that I could have these lessons. Well, that went on for until I was about 16 or 17, doing scenes from Shakespeare, doing poetry, and competing in Eisteddfods competitions. And so I kind of got a bug doing that. And I said to this woman once, I said, you're going to give me classes that I can have qualifications to perhaps teach. And she said, I'm not teaching you to be a teacher. I'm teaching you to be an actor. So that was the seed. She saw that there was something there. I had only ever, and I'm sure my mother had only ever seen me as a loudmouth show-off, you know. But so that's where it all began.
Amazing.
And I started out in amateur theatre in Newcastle, and then took myself off to Sydney. And I was going to go to the ensemble theatre was very new then. And I went along and saw a play there, and I thought, oh gosh, no, this is far too modern for me. You know, it was all sort of Stanislavski scratch and mumble type acting. And so I went to a very traditional drama school run by a very grand woman called Doris Fitton. And I had, I think, one lesson in her class. And she said, oh, my dear, you're too advanced for my class. So she put me up into the senior class, which was run by a man named John Alden, who then took me after one term into his Shakespeare company.
Oh, wow.
And so that was, you know, 60 years ago, my first professional job. And curiously, in my first professional job, I played one of the witches in Macbeth. And in my last big job in Wicked, I was pretty much a witch as Madame Morrible as well. So fortunately, the first letter is W, not B. And don't tell me otherwise. Come on, what's next?
Speaking of hobbies, what do you have any hobbies now? Anything you like to do?
Hobbies?
Yeah.
No, I'm too damn lazy. Crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
Television. I used to be an absolute avid reader. And in these last 6 months or so, I just don't seem to be able to stay with a book. I hope it comes back because I keep reading book reviews. I keep thinking about books on my shelf that I'd like to read again. But I'm finding it really depressing that I'm not reading. You know, I listen to music, and the old body doesn't let me exercise very much anymore. So that's out the window. But at least I've got a swimming pool and I can exercise in there. Yeah.
Back
And
in the
of course,
days,
eating and drinking.
back in the days
Fine
of,
wine.
back in the days of the green room, you were pretty good at Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah. Yeah, I love watching quiz programs on the television, and I get very, very angry at the stupidity of people who have the audacity to go onto some of those programs. Oh, but I especially love it when I watch Jeopardy, which is American, and I can answer the questions about American stuff, and they can't. Oh, I'm very proud of that.
Do you have a favourite food?
Favourite what?
Food, and do you have a favourite dish that you'd like to cook?
No, darling. I just like good food. I like European food, Greek food, Italian food, French food, and I try to be imaginative with cooking. It's a little bit boring now because I don't entertain much, and I don't entertain at all, and it gets very boring cooking for one person, So I try because I know I've got to eat and I've got to, eat properly. But I still do try to experiment and do interesting things with flavors and so forth. Yeah.
We've already spoken about shows that you enjoy, so we'll move to Ken's next question.
First jobs out of school, when you left school.
Yeah. At 14 and 10 months, I was in a frock shop.
Frock shop,
as they were called, a frock salon, where as an almost 15-year-old, my job was to sweep the floor, dust the shelves, unpack the stock, and get the lunches and cups of tea for the grown-ups. Great job. £5 a week.
Oh, wow.
£5 a week, yes. And after that, I became an usherette at the Civic Theatre in Newcastle, which is a magnificent theatre. Well, of course, that fed into my love of movies. Seeing the same movie a couple of times a day for about 3 weeks. I couldn't have been happier. I love that. But after that, this is all before I left Newcastle to go to Sydney to pursue the old acting thing. After the usheretting, I became a shoe salesperson for David Jones in the big store that opened in Newcastle, and I was actually trained in the David Jones way of shoe fitting and fashion, and it could have perhaps been a career. The head of the department seemed to think so, but eventually the acting bug took over, and that's when I hightailed it out of Newcastle.
Got into acting. Now, I just want to quickly read something for the fans that don't know about this show. It's a personal favourite of mine, Richmond Hill, which was created by Reg Watson, who created Prisoner, Neighbours, and many other TV shows. Now, this show had Ross Higgins, Paula Duncan, Tim Elston, Amanda Muggleton, Emily Simons, Gwen Plumb, and yourself. It first aired on the 27th of January, 1988, and the final episode was on the 22nd of June, 1988. You appeared in 59 episodes, and despite amazing ratings for this show, Channel 10 decided not to commission any more and focus on E Street. What was Richmond Hill like? Did you meet Reg Watson? You already knew him at that time?
I don't know whether I met him during Richmond Hill or whether I met him during Prisoner, because he was an absolute stalwart of Grundy organisation, and but Richmond Hill was an interesting thing. I was ever so grateful for that, because the casting of me was deliberate to get rid of the Joan image, because suddenly there I am with a smart hairdo and clever clothes and all that, and she was a funny character, but there were scenes that I just adored doing, particularly with not Gwenny, but oh Lord, what was her name?
Betty?
Betty Lucas.
Yes.
Betty Lucas, because it bordered on a Golden Girls issue with big bossy me and silly Daffy, whatever the character that Betty had. And they were wonderful. I thought they were fabulous scenes that we did, you know. And yeah, it was all very political, that whole situation of canning it, because it was rating.
Yeah.
And it was great fun. I mean, it was a hoot to be around Gwenny Plumb. My dear, the air could be blue. You think I have language? Oh boy. And of course, Emily, dear, sweet, lovely Emily Simons. I adore her. And she doesn't look a day older. She does not look a day older. I look at Home and Away because I'm addicted to that. That's my 7 o'clock issue. You know.
You watch Home and Away?
Oh God, yes.
Oh.
Yes, I can't miss an episode. If I do, I watch it. I look at it again on the repeat thing the next day. She just has never aged.
Yeah.
She's wonderful. Yeah, and I don't remember much about Ross. He was a nice bloke, really nice bloke. But Ross was more famous for voice work,
yeah,
than actual on-screen acting, you know. And of course, Amanda Muggleton is still a friend, you know. So, yeah, but it was lovely. And I was very appreciative of Grundy's doing that for me, to just get rid of all that ugly stuff, you know, and glam me up a bit. It was terrific. I enjoyed it, except I found it really boring and annoying during shooting days when, because of time frame situations and day one, day two, day this, day that, the wardrobe people were forever whisking me away to change the bloody costume, it was day this, it was day that. Whereas in Prisoner, of course, I was just in all those drab things all the time and didn't have to worry about makeup and stuff. So the downside of Richmond Hill was being glamorous, if you get my drift. What
Matt,
you got?
I think we'll need to skip a few.
Yeah,
questions.
that's okay. No, we'll work over to. So Paula Duncan was also on Richmond Hill. What was it like working back with her?
Oh, it was all right.
Yeah.
So Paula's a force of nature. You know,
Apparently,
she's an old mate.
Yeah,
What's
apparently.
that, Ken?
Apparently, she said she was always exhausted in Prisoner because she was always crying.
No, in Richmond Hill.
Oh, in Richmond Hill.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, Paula can cry like that, you know. Just give her a roll and she'll cry for you.
TV Week said that at the time it was one of the highest rating shows. Were you shocked when it was axed?
Well, not particularly, because I was going through a bit of a bad trot when the news came through of it being axed, as you say. I'd just gone into bankruptcy and I'd had a breakdown, and I was pretty fragile, let's put it that way. And so it came to me as a little bit of a relief.
Okay. Yep. Gwen Plumb we've spoken about, so we'll move over to Ken again.
Okay, we'll get back to peanut butter. Can you tell us about peanut butter and a meat pie and Coke?
Childhood, Ken, childhood. I discovered peanut butter long before people were having allergies. I discovered peanut butter as a very small child and I adored it. And to this day, I still do. And it was wartime and it was rationed. It was, you know, food was rationed. But the man that my mother used to be a bus conductress with the driver, you know, like her partner on the buses. He gave Mum his ration for peanut butter. When I started school, I had peanut butter sandwiches every day of my school life, except Monday when the bread was stale, and then I was allowed to have a pie and a new drink called Coca-Cola. Yum. So that's the story of meat pies, Coca-Cola and peanut butter.
Nothing better.
Thank you.
Now, we've already spoken about you've been a prolific reader of books, so I will move on to The Beach Hotel. Now, I just want to read this for the fans if I can. This is okay. I found it online. Arthur Greenhalgh, is it Greenhalgh? You pronounce your
Greenhalgh.
Okay. Was a founder of the Showmen's Guild of Australasia. World War II meant that his travelling troupe was stranded in Newcastle, so he purchased the Beach Hotel. Jamie Burns says, I was training in the Air Force at Rathmines at the time and had ventured into town for the weekend leave. I started chatting with some people and they took me down to the pub. We walked in the side door and there was this young lady, a young, beautiful woman, up on a table, hair flying, a pint in one hand, her dress hanging off her shoulder and singing in an extremely ribald song. And I thought, I'm home. The young lady was Maggie Kirkpatrick, the actress, one of the great divas of Australian theatre. I don't know if you've ever read that.
Dear Jamie, dear, he was a Scottish troubadour. He can talk about bawdy songs. He had a truckload of them. And yes, the Beach Hotel was our gathering spot. And we used to sit in a little back room, you know, and drinking pints and beer was cheap. You know, we young people had no money. And some played chess, some sang songs, some just told dirty stories. I don't know. It was really interesting because Arthur had a wife called Fuchsia, which is a wonderful name. And Fuchsia used to sit at the end of the bar, and then it would become time for her to go upstairs to bed. And she'd put some money into my hand and say, get me a bottle of port, love. Don't tell Arthur. So off she'd go upstairs to bed, and I'd buy a bottle of, I don't know, sherry or port or some awful thing, and I'd take it up to her. They were fun days. They were indeed.
There's also a place.
Jamie's gone now.
There's also a coffee place in Sydney called the Brazil.
No, it was in Newcastle, Ken. The Brazil was in Newcastle.
Oh, Newcastle.
And it was the first coffee lounge. And there were a lot of Italian migrants because there was a migrant camp actually just out of Newcastle. And a lot of the refugees from Europe settled in Newcastle because of the steelworks. And it used to be very interesting because you'd see these European men going off to work in the steelworks in suits with a briefcase, you know, with their salami sandwich in it. And they might have been lawyers or doctors or architects or anything, you know, but they'd be working on the wharves or in the steel mills. And one place that opened was this coffee lounge, quite small. And that was when we first tasted espresso coffee. And, oh, of course, my mother thought it was an absolute den of iniquity. I think she thought I was going to be sold into white slavery or something. But all we did was sit around, and some of the boys would play chess, and some would read poetry, and would drink coffee and smoke black Sobrani cigarettes and think we were terribly worldly. And we kind of thought that we were beatniks, really, because we didn't wear makeup, we had long hair, and we had black duffel coats, and we girls wore black stockings, and people were shocked. People were so shocked. So that was the Brazil.
Wow, amazing times.
That was the late 50s, yeah.
Very sophisticated.
Oh, yeah, we thought so.
Nothing like black Sobranis. You've been reunited with both Emily Simmons and Ray Marr when you played two guest characters in Home and Away. Firstly, Marilyn's auntie, Jean Chambers, and secondly as Viv the Gov Standish, who viewers were first introduced to when Danny Sutherland was sent to prison and was met by a bitchy, bullying woman who she found out was the top dog, as well as her new cellmate. It is thought Viv was maybe based on Joan Ferguson.
Oh, yeah.
What was it like working with both Emily and Ray again, and all the other actors you worked with?
Well, Ray, I first worked with in 1980 in a trilogy of plays for the Adelaide Festival, and then again in Sydney. And Ray was a mate for many, many years. So it was no big deal to go and work with him, and nor Emily. It's just that I hardly even regard those Home and Away appearances, because I think they probably came at a time when I was a bit desperate for a dollar, because the roles weren't particularly challenging or interesting, really. You know.
What about Home and Away, Tamin Sursok?
Yeah. What about it? Sweet little girl. I mean, I don't know her.
Okay.
I went to her 21st birthday party. You know,
Right.
simple as that.
Yeah.
I worked with her in the show. I know nothing about Tamin.
Now the fans will be itching for us to get into Prisoner, so we will get into one of the greatest Australian TV shows in history. You appeared in 405 episodes. You came onto the screen as Joan the Freak Ferguson on the 29th of June, 1982 in episode 287, and Wentworth changed forever. Now, we spoke to Ian Bradley in episode 4 of Talking Prisoner, and he told us that he created the character of Joan Ferguson, and the first person he had in mind was you. Do you remember the time that he spoke to you about the role?
He didn't speak to me about it.
Oh, he didn't?
No, a mutual friend in a pub said, "Hey, Bradley's got a role for you." And it was New Year's Eve. It was New Year's Eve, and I'd called into this pub to buy a bottle of wine. I was going to dinner with friends, and this mutual friend of Ian's and mine said, Bradley's got a role for you, and it's in Prisoner, and it's the role of a sadistic, corrupt bulldog screw. How do you feel about that, Maggie? I said, bring it on. Bring it on. So there you go. As you probably know, I had auditioned years before for the role of Vera Bennett and didn't get it. But that was, no skin off my nose. I just kept going back to the theatre because I'd had minimal experience in television, and it wasn't really until Prisoner that I learned the ropes. But I'm very grateful to Ian for that role.
So you didn't have to audition.
In spite of the description.
So there was no audition for Joan. You just got the role. That was it. Ian had you in mind. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And how long was it for when he mentioned it? Was it just for a few months? Did you know it was going to go on?
Oh, 3 months. Yeah.
Months. Yep.
Yeah. The initial contract was 3 months, and I think I'd filmed about. I hadn't even gone to air. I'd filmed a few episodes, and because they're done ahead, and they renewed, they extended it because it was working. I mean, the powers that be saw that it was working, and so they took it on from there. And the rest, as they say, is history.
It certainly was working.
Yeah, it did, didn't it?
Yep, it certainly did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm rather proud of it, actually. In hindsight, I think I don't dismiss it as, oh, look, it was just a job. I mean, it gave me a great deal. It took a hell of a lot from me too, here and there, but I'm proud of it, and more particularly is the fact that I work with people like you and all that other wonderful mob with you on that floor who taught me everything about cameras. You know, there were just moments sometimes, Ken, when I'd see a little hand, either you or whoever, you know, the camera, just a little gesture from the side of the camera, and I'd know what to do. And Jenny Williams, amazing, absolutely amazing. So any success really that I had with Joan Ferguson, yes, I created the character, yes, I performed it, but the finishing off of it is all down to you people, you know, to every single one of you who worked with me. And I mean with me. You were all so supportive, and I have never, ever forgotten that. So there.
Matt, over to you.
Yeah.
You can.
Get him a tissue before he cries.
Actually, I'm going to throw you a question that's not on the sheet just because you're speaking about the crew. You're close to Kendal Flanagan, who a lot of cast and crew talk about. Can you share some thoughts on Kendal?
Well, the funny thing is that the first time I worked with Kendal, I was in the early stage, you know, in those first couple of weeks. I was flying back home to Sydney every Friday evening. And Kendal, after we'd finished, came down to the bunker where we changed to thank me and said, "We've actually worked together before." And I said, "What?" And he said, "At Her Majesty's Theatre in Melbourne in 1970, I don't know, 73 or something, it might have been, I was in a big musical called Irene, which was Julie Anthony's big break. Kendal Flanagan was moonlighting as a schoolboy, I think, on the follow spot. So that it was his entry into camera work, really, because he had to set up where the follow spot was going to go. So he then directed me in some fabulous episodes. And he used to love doing close-ups of just that, of Joan, just the eyes, you know. He said, "It's as good as De Niro. It's as good as De Niro. When I do close-ups of your eyes." I wouldn't be doing close-ups of my eyes these days. But no, he was a man of enormous potential, but sadly a very flawed human being, you know, and I mean sadly flawed. A great loss, actually, great loss.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one more, the god of Australian TV, Ian Bradley. What was it like working with Ian, who we've obviously spoken to?
I really didn't. I knew Ian as a drinking mate.
Okay.
I mean, you know, Ian, as you know, in his, you know, he used to go to the Gladstone Hotel where the actors drank, and that's where I met Ian and Annie, and I didn't really work with Ian, you know, like he was just a mate who was there. He happened to be the producer.
Strange that you
a good fella.
Yeah.
Strange that you mentioned meeting Ian in a pub, because that was the first time I ever met him too, in a pub.
Oh, darling, actors, directors, producers, cameramen, pubs have a certain appeal.
Had you watched Prisoner before you got the role of Joan? Were you a fan?
Oh yes, yeah. Whenever I was home, because you know, bear in mind that before Prisoner, I'd had 20 years in the theatre.
Yep.
And so that's nighttime stuff. But on the times when I wasn't, it was part of the. I wasn't fanatical about it. I was impressed by it. You know, you couldn't help but be impressed by it back then. You know, for a show like that to come onto our screens with all that violence and great performances, you know, from mainly women who'd cut their teeth in theatre.
Definitely. Now, you also worked closely with Sheila Florence. Now, we have to ask you, because we get everyone to share a story about Sheila, that you had some brilliant scenes with her. I mean, I remember the one in the cell where you were getting her drunk, the liquor. There was just so many to list, but what was it like working with her?
Well, Sheila was a funny old biddy. I had enormous respect for her, enormous respect. She could be so grand, and she could be so coarse. She could be like Lizzie. Yeah, always a pro. You know, the scenes would just go like that. But she did a terrible thing to me once. We had a scene out of the studio. We were in some kind of area around the channel out there, and I had to shirt front her and throw her down. And we had the mat and we had the stunty there and all that, and it worked beautifully. I think we did it in one take. Well, we went back up to the green room and it was a rehearsal day. And whilst we were waiting to go into the studio to do some rehearsing, Peter Pinney, one of the Grundy executives, came into the green room to say good day to the girls. And Sheila said, "Oh, Peter, you should have seen what Maggie and I did today. Oh, we did the most wonderful scene. She shirt-fronted me and she threw me down. It was fantastic, Peter. Maggie, come here, darling, come here. Come and show him. Show Peter." No, I said, "No, Sheila, we've done it now. I mean, she's a little bird-like person, for goodness sake. And look at big hulking me." And I said, "No, Sheila, we're not going to do that because it's done under safety regulations, you know." And no, don't be a wimpy thing. Come here, come. Look, Peter, just watch what we did. She said, "Go." I said, "Oh, all right." So I barely touched her. A little bit of a flick. Down she went and broke her bloody wrist.
Oh, dear.
Well, I ran out of the green room crying. Sheila was taken off to hospital. Grundy sent me a big bunch of flowers. And forever, ever after, when asked about Prisoner and asked about the freak, asked me, "Oh, well, of course, you know she broke my wrist." Oh, yes, she did. Yes, I didn't like the woman and I didn't like the character. And I thought, "Oh, you old bugger. I had been so nice to you for all those years." She said, No. I didn't like the woman and I didn't like the character. She broke my wrist. God, you asked about Sheila Florence, I've told you.
Oh, that's great.
Thank you. You had
Just before Ken asked the question, you're just talking about stunts. You did all your own stunts on Prisoner? You never had a...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hanging from stairways, hanging off cliffs, doing the fighting, but of course, with the best stunt coordinators, Glenn Ruland and I, we used to have such a ball choreographing those things. And the fight I had with Maury Fields,
Yes.
you know, it was like two blokes. It was two blokes having a punch up. Do you remember that, Ken?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, it was a good one, wasn't it?
Yes. But Maury, such a lovely guy.
Oh, how divine. Oh, I loved him. I loved him. Beautiful man. Yeah, well, there you go.
Speaking of lovely people, Gerda Nicholson, you had some wonderful scenes with her. Any memories of Gerda?
Total bliss. You know, I mean, first, ultimate professional, always absolutely on the money, but warm and intelligent and a gracious woman. Beautiful. beautiful woman. And I really think that the ugliness of Ferguson's character and what I, was given to do with it worked beautifully with her, like a line of steel inside her. She was indeed a bit of an ice maiden. And what's her name? And what was the character's name? Reynolds.
Yeah.
Reynolds, yeah. But a truly wonderful human being. God. Yeah. They say the good die young, don't they?
Yeah.
That's why we're still kicking.
Yeah.
And she was, her character was
I'm
so
nearly 81, Hey?
81.
What? In a month's time, yeah.
You don't look 81.
I feel it. From the neck down, I feel it.
I'll never forget that slap that Anne Reynolds gave you. It was it was such a shock because her character was
I can't remember it. I can't remember it, but I'm sure it was absolutely legit because I hate faked slaps.
Ah.
I hate, I had to do it on stage once and it never kind of worked. And when I was working with that dear little boy,
Shane.
Yeah, Robert was his
Robert
name.
Summers, yeah.
I slapped him one day and I said, look, darling, I said, I'm actually going to slap you. We're not going to fake this. I'm going to slap you and it will hurt and you'll be fine. It'll only hurt for a minute. So I slapped him, the look on his face, and he came back at me. And the performance was fantastic because it had had the impact. And so I don't remember Gerda slapping me, but if she did, it would have been a beauty. It would have been for real.
It was good. The scene was in her
office. I hate fake.
Yeah.
You can't fake those things. No,
because she was dating Dan, who was a friend of Rita's character on The Prisoner, and you had a crack at her about it, and she just went for a big slap across your face.
Oh, is that right? Oh, well, good on you for remembering. I don't.
Now, just as your character developed and the storylines got heavier, can you just give the fans a glimpse of like a day in your life when you're at Wentworth, like shooting, like coming in the morning, learning lines or waiting around? Is there something you could share?
Television and film work, Matt, is called hurry up and wait.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I would get up very early in the morning, drive out to Nunawading, have fabulous crumpets with bacon and cheese on them from the canteen. Annie Phelan and I were addicted to those early in the morning, and some strong coffee. And I don't know, just learn lines and get going.
Yeah. Because you guys work very hard for actors on that show. I mean, they were big.
Oh, it would never be allowed. It would never be allowed now. Yeah. I think Val had some statistics about that. I mean, it was 5 days a week from 12 hours a day. And then, of course, on weekends, sometimes you had promotional stuff to do.
Yeah.
It was hefty going. Hefty going. No wonder we drank.
And some of the other cast members have mentioned in the interviews we've spoken about what they did waiting around in the green room, and they all did mention Trivia Pursuit with Maggie.
5 o'clock Friday afternoon, did they mention?
No.
Yes. Well, the cheap bubbles came out then, didn't they, Ken?
Yes.
And in Annie's case, the VB. So any scenes that had to be done from 5 o'clock onwards were dubious, to say the least.
VB, which is called Visitor's Beer.
And the cardboard handbags.
Yeah.
Oh, and the cardboard handbags, yes.
Yes. Now, I've already asked you about the crew and so forth, so I'm not going to embarrass myself again, but it was I must agree with you that the crew, you know, apart from myself, the crew were really fantastic, and they were hardworking guys and girls. Yeah. And Jenny was great. She was just such a fantastic lady.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good DA.
Yeah.
And saved a lot of directors' bacons at different times.
But, you know, I mean, those intricacies of sound, particularly, and camera switching in those days, you know, with the mic up above and this camera to that camera and the volume of the voice to go with it, you know, like just all of us working together, you know, Jenny and you on the cameras and the boys on the booms. Fabulous teamwork, fabulous.
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd find that anymore because there seem to be so many rules and regulations and demarcation issues. You know, you're a cameraman, you can't tell me what to do. You know, your sound, I don't need to talk to you. I'll only talk to my director or my, you know, first assistant. But we had none of that. We all worked together, didn't we?
A lot of times we solved a lot of problems that directors weren't even aware of.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My word. Made it a bit easier for people in the editing, didn't we?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you ever
What's
have
next?
any involvement with the writers in developing story arcs for Joan at all?
Not in developing, only in stopping.
Stop. That was Ken's next question.
Oh, no. It started to get a little bit silly. Such things as Joan Ferguson learning to drive. Well, I'm sorry, I went along with it, but surely if you knew the character well enough, you would imagine that Joan Ferguson could probably strip down and put together again a motor vehicle. You know, she would have done her own servicing of the vehicle. And then when they wanted me to take up ballroom dancing.
Oh, ballroom dancing.
Oh, yes. I said, no, that's absolutely ridiculous. And I categorically refused to do it. Ferguson does not have people up close. What were they thinking of? Had they not followed? I mean, this is in maybe the last 18 months or so.
Yep.
So I said, as an alternative, what about golf? Because you can keep your distance with people with golf. And at the back of my mind was the thought, I might get a nice new set of golf clubs out of this. And then I can retire. When I retire, I can take up golf. Because I'd always had a bit of a penchant for it. Well, no, they didn't buy me a new set. Ray Lindsay brought an old set out of his bloody garage for me to use. So that was a fairly short-lived thing. But no, they started to get, in that last year, I thought they started to get a bit silly with Ferguson. And it wasn't until the end was announced that the game was lifted. And after that announcement was made, those storylines just took off. They were fantastic to the demise because, and I believe so too, the viewers would have wanted to see Ferguson get her comeuppance. And so that was a wonderful ploy to trap her the way it was done. And so it did go out on a bang instead of a whimper, which had it been left to dribble away, would have been very sad given the track record that it had.
Do you think with the storylines, when you were mentioning how they went off a little bit, do you think that was because there were so many storyliners and writers always involved, whereas shows now tend to have a writer that writes out a whole season? They don't change writers or directors.
Yeah. Well, you see, we were doing 2 hours of television a week. They don't do that anymore, you know. And they get, the writers, dare I say, are probably better as well. But I reiterate that it is good that the show lifted its game towards the end in those last 6 weeks or so. It would have been very sad otherwise.
I have to say, I mean, the shows they're filming in America, to film 1 hour takes them about 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, yes.
Now, I mean, you guys were filming 2 hours a week.
As I said, it would never be allowed now. Yeah.
So we've spoken about Shane. So we'll move on to Ken's question.
We know many actors have various techniques on remembering lines, and you had lots of lines to remember. Did you have a technique to learning them?
Ken, learning lines is the bane of my existence. I loathe it. And I always find it difficult. Now, for television, given the speed with which we worked and the scenes which weren't that long, I used to read at home at night. I would put the shooting order in, put all the scenes in the order of the way they're going to be shot. I would read and read and read and read. And then when it came during the camera rehearsals, I'd have that script in my hand. I'd have the scene in my hand. I'd probably be reading it and going through the movements and the camera movements and all that, still with it stuck in my hand. Then when it came time to shoot, I'd shove it under a cushion or under a mat, or my bits of script were all over the set, hidden in various places, and then I'd do the scene. And I think in the main, I averaged 2 takes.
Wow.
Over the years. There were times with difficult scenes that it took, you know, involving other people, where it took more, and sometimes with lesser experienced in the speed of series television, it would take more with some actors. But you know, sometimes my first take was accepted, but I would ask to do another one just to be sure, you know, because I may not have felt right. And you know how tight the scheduling was, but we got by, but the learning was a nightmare.
Yeah.
Still is to this day.
Yeah.
I have pieces secreted everywhere, but I'm not quite as bad as Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
Yes.
With Al Pacino, when he had the words across Pacino's chest. I'm not quite that bad.
They made Brando pay a bond to be on The Godfather because he was so unpredictable. They said,
oh, yes.
You want this part, you got to pay us a bond, and we'll keep that bond until you finish the movie.
Until you finish, yes. And how wonderful was it?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, I have to ask, I've not seen a better character on TV since Joan Ferguson. It was unbelievable. Did you find it exhausting playing such an intense character? At the end of the day, coming out of character, it was easy just to...
No. I got into character when I heard the word action. Yeah. Now, look, this is a funny thing. People talk about, oh, they're so involved in the character, so immersed in it, and that, oh, blah, 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 blah. Yes, there are some roles, especially in the theatre, that really take their toll on you, you know, because it's a relentless couple of hours at a time. But with a show like Prisoner, where, as we were just saying, short scenes, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And no, it's called acting. And I put the clothes on. There she is in front of me. The physicality is evident, yeah. And the rest followed. And God willing, the script writers have helped me also with the stories and of what is expected of me. But no, as soon as that uniform came off. No, it was just silly old me again. None of that rubbish.
Through its run, we saw Joan go from long hair to short hair. Can you tell the fans why the hair change?
Yeah, it was summertime and I wanted to get my hair cut.
Deep and meaningful.
So, no big deal. It wasn't anything to do with Grundys or script writers or Joan. No, it was just Maggie who wanted to get the bloody haircut. And of course, all they had to do then, because I had a perm, had mad curls, short hair, and all they had to do was slick it back. Didn't matter.
Yeah. Speaking of changes, we noticed in the later episode you'd gone from with the officer's uniform wearing the skirt to the pants. Was there any reason for that?
I have no idea.
No,
I have no idea. Nobody consulted us, asked us. We just did it. There you are.
Yep.
I don't know the reasoning. Maybe it might have been because of a lot of the stunts that I did.
Ah, yes.
It might have made that a little easier for me.
Yep.
And in the name of decency. Come on, Matt, keep going.
All right, Ken.
Well, the next question we have to ask you about, because all the fans would have to know about the famous black leather gloves. Can you tell us whose idea was that?
I have no idea. I cannot remember. I don't know where that came from. I don't think it was an original of mine.
It may have
we would
been.
have to look at a script of episode whatever it was when I came in to find that out.
Okay.
I really don't know.
We might get to the bottom of it.
What a totem. Oh, Jesus.
Possibly a writer.
Do you know that I once at a charity do in London, they auctioned off a pair of black leather gloves, which were not the original ones. I don't know where they went, somewhere. And it raised £500.
Oh, wow.
For the charity. Yeah.
Wow. I want to move on to Pamela Rabe, who played Joan Ferguson in the new Wentworth, which was one of Foxtel's highest rating dramas, which was all because of Prisoner. What were your thoughts when you heard about Wentworth? And did Pamela
I was intrigued.
Yeah.
I was intrigued. I thought, well, now, what tack are they going to take? And this is before I knew about any casting. And it was interesting that they used the same names throughout. That was a nice little sort of homage to Prisoner. But as for Pamela Rabe,
you've worked with
can I say? I've played her mother. I've worked with her twice in the theatre before that.
Yes.
Before she came into the. Well, my dear, how magnificent is she? Yeah. She's truly one of the great actors in this country. And I just love her to bits. I mean, she's a wonderful human being. And what really chuffed me was with the awards that came her way, playing a character called Joan Ferguson, she paid tribute to me, which I thought was astonishing and terribly generous of her. She's a great woman. And as for the show itself, well, how fantastic, how brilliant was Wentworth. It was, Prisoner was for the 80s, but wow, this is for the 21st century, this show, with all the violence and the language. And I mean, the language, whoa. They even had the C word.
Yeah, I know.
God, we really said bloody in Prisoner. Goodness gracious. I mean, amazing performances all round. But I didn't like as much the fact that Ferguson became an inmate.
Yeah, that was in, yeah.
That would not happen.
Yeah.
That could not happen. I would have liked to have seen her just simply become the governor.
Which she was. Yeah.
And stay there and cleverly cover her tracks.
Yeah.
I'm sure they could have gotten mileage out of that sort of performance, but Pamela played it so brilliantly into that sort of a decline into madness, really, wasn't it, in those final episodes? But she is an extraordinary actress, and I take my hat off to her. It's wonderful. Yeah.
What was really interesting about watching Wentworth and her was you always, as a Prisoner fan, you're always thinking, what would have Joan from Prisoner do? You'd see her get into those situations, and you're always thinking in the back of your mind about the original Joan Ferguson. It was
yes, and it was interesting, the portrayal of various people with the names that had been, like, what was the character that Maggie Miller played?
Oh, Mari Winter. Yeah.
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 Now, who was that in Wentworth?
Oh, her name was
recent.
I'll look it up. Her name was
but they were all there, and lovely actors like Susie Porter and
that was her.
So forth.
Susie Porter.
Yeah, the big time gangster woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, brothel runner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you are. That's Wentworth.
Yeah.
Would you have liked to have seen Joan actually become governor? You did become governor at times, but like permanent governor of Wentworth.
Well, it could have been interesting, and then it could also have changed the dynamic of the whole show because of the. I think it would have become more draconian if she were there, and that would have really changed the dynamic again, because it was kind of a bit welfare state-ish there at times, with the benevolent top dog, the benevolent governor, as in Anne Reynolds. It would have been interesting, but, let's face it, the show had run its race, darling, hadn't it? I think the writers were probably more tired than we were.
When you were playing the role back in the day, what was it like being out in public? Did you ever have a lot of fans coming up to you at the time? Anyone?
No. A lot of people would ask me if I was a school teacher. So, there was a connection with authority that they couldn't quite figure, because I did, go to great lengths at times to look as much unalike as possible. It's been very interesting since I moved up here to a fairly remote-ish part of Queensland. But a lovely lady in the local supermarket the other day said, "Excuse me, but has anybody ever told you that you look like Maggie Kirkpatrick?" I said, "Funny you should say that." But then on other occasions, people have said, "Oh, gosh, has anybody told you look like that awful woman from Prisoner?" I said, "Yes, so many times, people. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of people mistaking me for that wretched creature." But then, of course, if somebody says, "Oh, I saw you in Shoehorn Sonata," or "I saw you in Wicked," they have my full attention because they've been to the theatre.
Yes. Now, some fans will know this story, but for the ones that don't, can you please tell us about Sammy Davis Jr. visiting the set of Prisoner and your time with him?
Well, I don't know. He was on one of his many tours of Australia, and apparently he'd been watching the show and was quite taken with my performance as Joan. And he said it reminded him of those women in the black and white movies of the 50s. You know, the acting style of the Ida Lupinos and people like that. So when he came to Melbourne, he wanted to visit the set. So he was helicoptered out, and we were shooting that day. Were you in the studio that day?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
No.
And honest to God, he was, well, the pair of us were like a couple of kids at Christmas time, both jumping up and down and squealing. And then we had lunch. He went up into the control room and watched a scene. There's a lovely little video of this, which I think I gave to one of the fan sites.
Groups.
Yeah. And he watched a bit from the control room, and we had lunch in the boardroom, and he invited us. It was just me and Elspeth and I can't remember who else, and Eileen, the publicist, and so forth. And he invited us to the Hilton to see his show. And I said, oh, well, I'll come on one condition. He said, you're giving me a condition? I said, yeah, if you sing My Funny Valentine, because it was the 14th of February.
Yeah.
So off we went, and he was into his act. And then he said, now I've had a request, and I don't usually do requests, but when this dame tells you to do something, you don't say no. And he said, so Maggie, this is for you. And he sang My Funny Valentine. Oh. And we had supper afterwards, and he was going to, he came back. That was at the beginning of 80, I can't remember the date. But I did have a birthday over there when I visited him in Vegas. He was at Caesar's Palace with Bill Cosby.
Wow. And
that was hysterically funny. And it was long before the scandal about Bill Cosby. And as I was leaving, it was my birthday. And as I was leaving, Cosby poked his head out of his dressing room and said, come in here and have a drink. And so I spent a good half hour having a drink with him and talking about politics and showbiz and all. And, you know, there was absolutely nothing untoward about it. And Sammy, in the meantime, was up in his suite cooking supper after he'd done his show, complete with a birthday cake. So that was all very nice, yeah. And then he did come back to Australia because I was doing Anything Goes. So it must have been, I think he died in 91 or thereabouts. But I caught up with him again when he came back for the Variety Club. Oh, no, he was doing that show with Frank Sinatra and Liza Minnelli. That's right, because Dean Martin had pulled out. Yeah. And when we had afternoon tea, it was a very funny afternoon, I shall tell you. We had afternoon tea in his suite, and Jack Thompson was there, and it was his wife was pregnant, and Liza had been out on the harbour, and she came in and joined us for a cup of tea. And Jack's wife with the belly was sitting there, and Liza leant over and put her face to the pregnant belly and said, "What good is sitting alone in your womb? Come hear the music play." I've never forgotten it. It was a magic moment. I've had some very magic moments, and all due to Prisoner, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was Caesar's Palace like? I mean, Bill Cosby, Caesar's
Oh,
Palace.
outrageous. Outrageous. I had a room with a circular bed and a mirror on the ceiling. I thought, hello, what's that for? Oh, no, it was, I mean, opulence, ridiculous.
Wow.
Bad taste opulence.
for the 80s. Also, Whoopi Goldberg was a big fan of Prisoner as well. I don't know if...
Oh, I believe so. Yeah, she was out at the studio. She came out to the studio. I don't know what that was for, but I've got a photo. Oh, I had a photo taken. I was in uniform, and I gave it to a fan who was a fan of mine, and his all-time favorite person is Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, wow.
So he's now got the photo of Whoopi and me together. So I gave it to him.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, there's no point hanging on to all that stuff.
Yeah. Now, the next one was, did you ever have a favourite story arc for Joan? Was there ever a storyline that you really enjoyed that you could remember?
No, Matt, I don't. Whatever storyline that appealed to me would have been something that had to do with my working with good actors.
Yeah.
Whatever the storyline was, as long as I was there with those terrific women, then that was all that one needed, you know. No, I don't have a favourite storyline at all. No. Some people might, but I don't.
Yeah.
Can't remember half of them.
There's so many.
Joan actually antagonised a lot of prisoners, but her very worst enemies were always the top dogs, the main three being B. Smith, Myra Desmond, and Rita Connors. The on-screen chemistry with them all shone through the screen. Did you instantly get on and find it easy doing scenes with Val and Anne and Glenda, or was it something that needed to be worked at?
Ken, you've just given me a lineup of some of the best actors in this country.
Yeah.
And I had the privilege of working with those women. So there was a difference in each one of them, which affected my portrayal of Joan. For Joan to react to whatever they were bringing to the table. Each one of them, absolutely perfect. And, you know, a great joy to confront them and have them confront me. That's what makes this business so special, when you get to work with people of that caliber. And I was very, very fortunate. The top dogs, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. As I said, each one different, but each one incredibly important to me and to my portrayal.
Definitely. My question was your least favorite storyline, which was obviously going to be the ballroom dancing and the golf. So we'll move.
Yeah, all that rubbish. Yeah.
We'll go to Ken's question.
All right. Did you ever find it difficult playing a lesbian character in the 1980s? And were you ever abused by viewers of the show because of that?
Did Anthony Hopkins have trouble playing a cannibal?
No.
And did people ask him if he ate human flesh?
Yeah, probably did, I'm sure.
No, come on, Ken. You know, like, whether I'm playing a New York society hostess or a fat old Jewish woman in a musical or a lesbian on television, it makes no never mind, you know. They're roles, they're characters. And actors portray characters. Simple.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into some breakdown scenes. And this one, there's something about this one. Episode 413,
Oh, love.
1st of November 1983, was written by Andrew Kennedy and Kevin Anderson, and the director is credited as Ross Jennings, but I know it was actually Kendal Flanagan. The studio cameramen were Wayne Lavender, Simon James, and myself. And the summary of this scene is that Joan is sent on a horrible trip. Two of Fellowes' henchmen break into Joan's house and warn her not to interfere in the drugs trade. To reinforce the point, they force her to take LSD. Joan relives her hanging, and there's a whole lot of things terrible things that happen to Joan. And when she comes down or from out of her trip, she discovers that she has blood on her hands and finds that she's killed her dog Major with a pair of scissors. Now, the reason I know it's Kendal Flanagan was because he was having trouble with how to set up the poor dog.
Yeah.
And I out of nowhere, I said to him, well, look, if just shoot the legs of the dog and get the handler to lie down behind the couch and lumber Joan with all the blood instead of putting it all over poor old Major. So I do recall that particular scene because it was the first and only time I ever had the temerity to actually speak to a director and give him some advice. And he liked the advice and he went ahead and shot it that way. But I just recently watched it again and I found it quite horrific simply because you didn't see anything more than, there wasn't any violence as such in it. It was all suggested. And the way you came out of it and expressed the look of on your hands of the blood and tried to shake it off, it was quite magic and beautifully done.
Thank you, Ken. I have no recollection of that. I know it happened. I know it happened. But I have nothing to add to your very lengthy description of the scene. So if it pleased, it pleased. And I'm delighted that you thought it was good. Yes,
I did. Absolutely.
Yeah. We won't go into the full episode breakdowns. We'll just get a couple more scenes. Now, episode 507, which was the fight between you and Maury Fields, Len Murphy, which has been classed as one of the greatest fights on Wentworth by the fans. It was actually directed by Sean Nash. Now, I just wanted to quickly touch on Sean because we've spoken to Sean.
Lovely Sean, lovely.
He directed the last two episodes of Prisoner. What was it like working with Sean?
Oh, lovely, lovely. I had no complaints much about any of the directors. You know, they all had their quirks. Sean was lovely, and they were great blokes. You know, I only had one gripe once when a female director came in and requested in the setting up of a scene that I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was totally against anything that Ferguson would have done. And I questioned her and I said, are you sure that's what you want? I said, you do know that Joan Ferguson is a lesbian. And she said, oh, I see. I thought, do your homework, lady. So I got my way with that. I mean, it reached a point with quite a number of us where we knew the character better than the writers, better than the directors. Isn't that so, Ken?
Yes.
You know, it just became second nature to us. Once we were in the uniforms, in the costumes, on the floor, in the studio there, we were those characters and we knew them inside and out.
Yeah, definitely.
What were your thoughts on the storylines for Blackmore, and what followed?
I don't know that. What is that? What's Blackmore?
That was the prison
Blackmore.
that Craven had. Ray Marr was the governor.
Well, what did I have to do with that? Seriously?
You went to the riot. There was a riot there. Rita had been transferred to Blackmore, the prison.
Oh,
And
that's
Okay.
gone. Next question.
All right. How about we move to the last episode, which was the major episode, Ken, 692.
Gorgeous.
We can scroll down.
692. Did the producers or writers approach you and discuss Joan's ending in the final episode? Were there alternative endings being discussed?
I don't recall that there were. There may have been, love. I was quite delighted with the ending, and whatever was going on around me was great fodder for my performance as Joan, in that of being set up, and and all those confrontations, with Meg Morris and with Anne Reynolds and whoever else came about. No, I was really very happy with the whole setup. I thought it was good. Did you? I think the viewers did.
I'd never actually seen the whole episode until recently, because as you know, we shot it out of sequence in the studio. But I watched it the last couple of episodes, and I was surprised. I was absolutely surprised, because it was so good and it worked so well, and it all fitted together. I mean, it was a brilliant,
I can't remember who the writers were of that last sequence, those last couple of blocks.
Ian
but they were darn good.
Mari Trevor and Ian
Mari
Smith.
was a producer, wasn't she?
Yes.
Mind you, Mari had introduced a few silly things, like a lot of makeup and stuff on the characters in her tenure there. But she was a damn good producer. It's just that the prison inmates started to look a bit like they were going out on a hot date. But she was an old pro, I mean, Mari had been around for a long time and damn good at her job. Yeah.
I have to say, with your last episode and your final scenes where they bring you in from the police station, you're on the white line and you're telling Morris to go for it, read it out.
Yeah.
You couldn't help but feel sorry for Joan as a fan. Even all the bad things that she had done, and this is due to you because of the way you made that character. You could not help feel sorry for her, that she was inside, even after all the bad things. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
It was a great final episode. I know you've probably been asked this question a lot of times, but if it was to continue, would you have stayed on, or were you happy to?
No, actually, I was planning to leave at the end of that year.
Okay.
I really felt I'd run the race, and certainly I think the writers had, as far as Joan was concerned. So in a way, it was a blessing that it came to a conclusion. You could hardly say it was axed after 692 episodes.
Yeah.
And the fact that it ended, as we have discussed, on such a high note, made it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now, I think we've run out of time, so I think you're going to be happy to come back and do a part 2 for us for the. We've been inundated with fan questions more than any interview we've had. There was over 200. If that would be okay.
In the new year, you think?
The new year for sure, definitely. And we also want to launch the exclusive Maggie Kirkpatrick memorabilia collection as well.
Oh, clever you.
Which we will do on the part 2 of the interview with you. That's
okay. Okay.
So we will end there. And that was episode 28 of Talking Prisoner. Thank you for watching. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel and share our videos where you can. Please also like our Facebook page. This episode of Talking Prisoner also available on all the podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the rest of them, and also on the talkingprisoner.com website. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure to speak with you, Maggie.
It was great fun.
Thank you, Maggie.
Goodbye, Ken.
Lovely to see you again.
You too.
And
See you in the
we'll,
new year.